I never planned to tell him everything. At first, I only mentioned you in passing, just enough to let my dad know you existed, but not enough to invite too many questions. The truth is, I wasn't ready for the scrutiny that always came with his sharp gaze. He has this way of seeing through every lie, every hesitation, and I wasn't sure I was ready for that kind of attention. But as things between us grew deeper, I found myself opening up more than I ever thought I would. It started small. How we met. The long conversations that lasted hours without either of us noticing how quickly the night passed. But then, little by little, I found myself sharing more. I began to tell him about the little things. How you laugh with your whole heart. How you always overthink things when you care too much. And how you hold your coffee cup with both hands as if the warmth was a quiet comfort you didn't want to let go of. I didn't expect to share these details, but somewhere along the way, I did. I told him about how you challenge me, how you don't let me get away with half-truths or empty words, and how you make me want to be a better version of myself, even on days when I feel like giving up. I told him about your fears, the ones you only whisper when the world feels quieter, about the things you've lost and the wounds that haven't completely healed. And then, I told him the hardest part. How afraid I was. Afraid of what he'd think. Afraid of whether he'd accept you the way I had. I feared that no matter how much I wanted you, his disapproval would plant doubts that I wouldn't be able to ignore. He listened, like he always does, his silence stretched between us, his expression unreadable. And I felt like a child again, waiting for approval that I wasn't sure would come. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. His voice was steady as always. "You must love her a lot," he said. At first I was ready to argue, to say that love wasn't the point, that this wasn't about love but about acceptance, about understanding. But the words caught in my throat, and I realized he wasn't asking. He was stating the truth that I hadn't been brave enough to say out loud yet. "Yes," I admitted. And there was a pause, the weight of it sinking in. "You already know what you have to do," he said after a moment. I frowned, confused. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means my opinion doesn't matter as much as yours does," he said, his gaze softening in a way I hadn't expected. I stared at him, trying to make sense of his words. "But you always said," I began, but he cut me off. "You've already made your choice, haven't you?" he interrupted. His words hung in the air, and for the first time I realized something. I didn't need his approval anymore, because deep down, I already had it, and that was all that mattered. It was the first time I understood that I wasn't asking for permission. I left his office with a strange feeling in my chest. That realization should have brought relief, but instead it made me restless. I thought about calling you, telling you everything, but then I hesitated. Would you see this as a step forward, or would you hear my doubts in the spaces between my words? I knew you could read between the lines, and I wasn't sure I was ready to share everything with you, especially the part of me that still wondered if I was making the right choice. It wasn't about love. I was certain of that. It was about everything else, about how my father's acceptance had always been a part of my identity, whether I realized it or not. How I had built so much of myself around his expectations. Next morning I found myself standing outside his office again, my fingers curled into fists. I didn't knock at first. I just stood there, my heart pounding in my chest. When I finally walked in, he looked up at me, his eyes scanning my face like he already knew what I was there for. "I need to know the truth," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. "About what?" he asked, his tone calm. "How you really feel," I said, meeting his gaze. He set his pen down, his eyes never leaving me. "Does it matter?" "It does to me," I replied, my voice steady. He sighed and rubbed his temple, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You think I don't approve?" I didn't answer. His gaze never wavered. "You want honesty?" he said after a long pause. "All right. I won't pretend this is what I imagined for you." My stomach clenched. This was the moment. But he continued, and what he said next shocked me. "That doesn't mean I'm against it." My mind spun as I tried to process what he was saying. "So, what are you saying?" I asked. He leaned forward, his fingers laced together. "I'm saying this isn't about me. It's about you. If you want her, then be with her. But be sure, because if you doubt it now, that doubt will only grow." His words settled in my chest, heavy and undeniable. Was I sure? I thought about you, about the way you looked at me when you didn't think I was watching, the way your presence had become my home. I already knew the answer, but hearing him say it out loud made something shift inside of me. "Yes," I said again, this time with more certainty. He nodded, and for the first time, I realized that what mattered wasn't his opinion but mine. It was a strange feeling to realize that I had been waiting for his approval for so long, but now, I didn't need it anymore. Still, a part of me was uneasy. "I thought about calling you, but I hesitated again. Would you want to hear everything I had to say? Would you sense the doubt I was still carrying?" But when I looked down at my phone and saw your name, my thumb hovered over the call button. It was time. I pressed dial, and as the phone rang, the moment stretched longer than usual. Finally, you answered, your voice warm, but tinged with curiosity. "Hey," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I talked to my dad." A long pause followed. "And?" you asked, your voice soft but eager for the answer. "He didn't reject you," I said slowly, as if I was still trying to process it myself. "But he wanted to make sure I was certain." There was a sharp inhale on the other end of the line. "Are you?" you asked, and the question hit harder than I expected. I looked up at the sky, watching the clouds drift lazily across the fading sun. I had spent so much time worrying about my father's approval, about how he would see you, that I hadn't taken a moment to ask myself the most important thing. "Yes," I said, my voice steady, unshaken. "I am." On the other end of the line, I could hear the shift in your breathing. I knew you needed to hear that more than anything else. "Good," you murmured, relief in your voice, "because I don't want to be a decision you have to defend. I just want to be yours." A lump formed in my throat. "You are," I whispered, and just like that everything shifted. There was no more doubt, only certainty. "So what happens now?" you asked. I glanced back at the house, at the window where I knew my father was still probably sitting, watching, thinking. "Now," I said, my voice filled with purpose, "I want you to meet him." There was a brief silence before you answered, your voice full of quiet understanding. "Okay." I sat in my car outside my father's house, my fingers drumming nervously against the steering wheel. The thought of bringing you here, of having you meet the man who had shaped so much of my life, made my stomach tighten. The last conversation with my father still echoed in my mind. He hadn't outright rejected you, but his words had been careful, measured. He wanted to see if you were someone who fit into the life he had envisioned for me. I reached for my phone and sent a quick message. "I'm outside. You ready?" A few moments later, your response came. "I'm here. Coming down now." I watched as you stepped out of your building, taking slow, steady strides toward my car. I could see the nerves you were trying to hide in the way your fingers gripped your bag strap and how your lips pressed together before you met my eyes. I unlocked the door and you slipped inside, exhaling as you settled into the seat. "You okay?" I asked, my voice softer than usual. "I should be asking you that," you replied, your voice softer, laced with something I couldn't quite place. I exhaled, gripping the wheel tightly. I told him everything, but now he needs to see for himself. You turned to me then, your expression unreadable. "And what are you expecting?" The question took me by surprise. I hadn't thought about it that way. I had been so focused on what my father might say, on how he might react, that I hadn't stopped to consider what I wanted from this meeting. I looked at you, really looked at you, and for the first time I realized what I truly wanted. "I just want him to see you the way I do," I said, my voice steady. You held my gaze for a moment before nodding. "Then let's go." With that, I started the car, my heart pounding in my chest as we pulled away from the curb. The road to my father's house felt shorter than usual, and too soon we arrived. The house loomed ahead, familiar, but suddenly intimidating. I turned off the engine, my fingers still gripping the wheel. Before we went inside, you spoke again. "I need to know something," you said, your voice steady. "If he doesn't accept me, if he has doubts, will it change anything for you?" The weight of your words settled between us, and for a moment I couldn't speak. I didn't hesitate. "No," I finally said. There was a small shift in your shoulders, a quiet understanding. "Okay," you whispered, and we stepped out of the car together. We walked toward the door, side by side, both of us facing the unknown. When I knocked, the sound echoed in the stillness of the afternoon. My father opened the door, his gaze flickering to me, then to you. The moment had arrived.